and gas supplies.
There was one explosion, then another one around 2 a.m. We were sheltering in the common space in the building. There were explosions one after another. Parrot is hiding under my arm.
The attack was part of an overnight barrage. Ukraine's Air Force reported Russia launched more than 500 drones and 45 missiles. Kiev said that its defense units had shot down most of them. Russian President Zelensky has said that President Putin is spending the time meant for preparation for a peace summit on finding ways to bomb Ukraine. He warned that only tougher sanctions on Russia's banking and energy sectors can reopen the path to diplomacy. So far, no date has been set for that meeting. Meanwhile, Ukraine's anti-corruption agency has been investigating the country's star deep strike drone company, Firepoint, which manufactures the Flamingo missile. Concerns have been raised that the company had misled the government on the pricing and the deliveries. And according to reports, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, or NABU, is also looking into the co-owner of President Volodymyr Zelensky's former film studio as the alleged ultimate beneficiary of the company.
And in news from Ukraine, Russia has launched one of its largest overnight assaults in weeks, striking multiple targets across the country's south. A Russian drone attack overnight damaged 4 power facilities near the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa. More than 29,000 people are without electricity, and these are the latest images of the Russian assault. Hardest hit was the port city of Kromorsk, just outside Odessa, where residential houses and administrative buildings were also damaged. Local officials say a 5-story apartment building in Zaporizhzhia region was hit, killing at least 1 civilian and injuring 28 others. Video from the scene shows shattered windows, debris-strewn streets and emergency crews at work. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Russia launched a staggering 537 drones and decoys along with 45 missiles. Ukrainian defenses reportedly intercepted or neutralized 510 of those drones and 38 missiles. And the attacks follow a deadly strike on Kiev that killed 23 as the US approves new military aid to Ukraine on the ground. Russian military reported on Russia's territorial gains and the recent strikes on Ukraine.
At present, the Russian armed forces have liberated 99.7% of the territory of the Luhansk People's Republic. Less than 60 square kilometers remain, and 79% of the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic. 74% of the Zaporizhzhia and 76% of the Kherson regions are under the control of Russian troops.
US President Donald Trump commented on NATO military aid, stating that the US is now selling equipment to NATO allies rather than directly to Ukraine, unless Europe agrees to cover the costs. NATO ambassador to the US, Matt Whitaker, said that the US is giving Ukraine deeper strike capabilities, aiming to boost its defense and offensive reach. He says the move, backed by President Trump, isn't costing US taxpayers. But on the other hand, an Axios report says the White House has accused European leaders of covertly undermining efforts to end the Ukraine war, claiming they're pushing Kiev to hold out for better terms and thus dragging out the conflict. Meanwhile, European officials expressed surprise at the allegations, highlighting a growing diplomatic disconnect among allies.
I said that you not more
Russia appears to be moving forward with its plan to restart the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which it seized from Ukraine in 2022. Now, according to reports, Russia is building nearly 80 kilometers of new power lines connecting the occupied port city of Berdyansk to Mariupol and eventually to the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine's southeast. Experts say it is a calculated push to bring the plant back online and under full Russian control. All 6 reactors at the site were gradually shut down after months of intense fighting, and concerns have remained high over the safety of the facility. The head of Russia's state nuclear agency, Rosatom, recently confirmed that replacing the damaged power grid is one of several key steps needed to resume operations. Russian troops captured the Europe's largest nuclear plant in the early days of the full-scale invasion and gradually shut down all 6 of its reactors by 2023. Before the war, the 6-gigawatt plant was connected to Ukraine's grid by 4 750 kilovolt lines, 2 passing through Ukrainian-controlled territory and 2 through occupied areas. The latter have been damaged in fighting. Nuclear watchdogs and Ukrainian officials have raised alarm over these moves, warning of both safety risks and the geopolitical consequences of Russia using critical energy infrastructure as a tool of war. Meanwhile, Russian-controlled administrators are restraining and retraining the plant's staff in preparation for returning the facility to full capacity.
Russia's war machine is on overdrive. Moscow claims a wave of massive group strikes against Ukraine. But Kyiv has hit back with its drone attack on Russia's major oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai. Just as the bombs rain down, Russia itself is in turmoil. It is grappling with one of the worst fuel crises in years. Our report tells you about the escalating firestorm right there. Take a look.
Sirens blare across Ukrainian skies. Russia unleashes massive group strikes. A barrage of high-precision weapons and unmanned attack drones bound Ukrainian cities through the night. Explosions light up the horizon, shaking buildings and shattering lives yet again.
The overall losses of the Russians in our Dobropilya counteroffensive alone are already more than 3,000, and most of them are irretrievable losses. It was there that the Russians wanted to make one of their significant breakthroughs on the front line, but our forces are neutralizing them, and that is important.
Kiev is striking back with precision. Ukrainian drones are targeting major oil refineries and energy infrastructure deep inside Russia. In less than 2 months, Ukrainian forces have struck 85 high-value targets in Russia. The strikes have pushed Russia's gasoline and diesel supplies to breaking point. Ukraine is using long-range drones to strike strategic energy facilities. It is reaching further into Russian territory than any point since the war began. At least 16 of Russia's 38 oil refineries have been hit since the beginning of August, some of them repeatedly targeted. Among the most significant targets is the massive 340,000 barrel per day refinery in Ryazan, located near Moscow. Other key refineries struck in recent weeks include major plants in Saratov, Novokuybishevsk, Volgograd and Bashkortostan. On September 18th, Ukrainian drones managed to penetrate deep into central Russia to hit the Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat oil refinery and petrochemical plant in Bashkortostan, about 1,400 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. That same day, a second strike targeted one of Russia's largest oil refineries in Volgograd, nearly 1,000 kilometers south of Moscow. The scale of disruption is unprecedented in Russia. Experts believe Ukrainian attacks have disrupted over 1 million barrels per day of Russia's refining capacity. Fuel crisis has hit the domestic market quite hard. Russia, the second largest exporter of diesel in the world, is taking drastic steps to conserve fuel for domestic use. While diesel exports have fallen sharply, Russia has banned petrol exports till the end of this year. Among all the regions, Crimea has been worst hit by the fuel crisis. Around 50% of gas stations in Crimea have halted sales due to the lack of fuel. While the timing couldn't be more devastating for the Kremlin, Russia is already reeling under its biggest fuel crisis in years, long queues at petrol stations, soaring diesel prices, and industries struggling to keep wheels turning. For millions caught in between, the price of this war is only climbing higher.
Several days ago, we had some difficulties. Yesterday, I queued for about 40 minutes to fill my tank, but I don't see anything critical or serious for me personally. I'm not panicking. I believe everything will stabilize. Everything will be fine.
I came to this gas station to see if there was any petrol. It appeared yesterday. Before that, for several days, there was no petrol at any station. It was a problem.
Massive strikes, exploding oil tanks and fuel shortages. Russia and Ukraine are both turning up the heat. The big question is, how much longer can Moscow sustain this war while battling a crisis in its own backyard? Bureau Report, WION World is One. And for more, joining me on this broadcast from Moscow is Sergei Strokan, who is a Russian political analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Strokan, for making time for us and joining us on WION World is One.
Thanks for having me.
So now, ahead of the meeting between President Trump and Zelensky, violence is still escalating in Ukraine. It's raging on as the Russian forces continue to move forward in the east. Now, what impact is that likely to have on today's discussions at the White House?
Well, the first point is that the meetings, that marathon meetings which are scheduled for these days, for this day, are coming as a follow-up to President Putin landmark meeting with President Trump in Alaska. While few details were revealed, that there was no even a press conference as such. According to several leaks, both presidents discussed the framework of the future peace settlement in Ukraine. So, it seems that today we are facing a moment of truth in Washington, as President Zelensky, who is followed by European leaders, have to talk to President Trump and to give their response to the initial understanding which was reached in Alaska. They are facing actually a painful dilemma, either to agree to certain basic terms and conditions which were discussed in Anchorage, or stubbornly to reject that and probably to kind of then opt for fighting with Russia, which, as you understand, is on offensive. Let me add to that before this meeting, President Trump made a stern warning to Ukraine, writing on a social network, that there's no way to come back to the time of President Obama and try to reclaim Crimea, as well as there's no way to talk about Ukraine membership in NATO. So it looks like this would come as a bitter pillow to Ukraine and its European group of support, and they will have to take some decision what to do with this. Either to continue to support Ukraine and ignore the appeal which would come from President Trump, or the other option, try to find their place in the future negotiating process where at the moment they're not present. So let us wait and see. It's quite clear that today we are awaiting a moment of truth in Washington, which would probably decide, you see, and shed some light on what is in store for Ukrainian settlement.
Right, Mr. Strokan, and we know that Putin has agreed to allow US and European nations to give Ukraine Article 5-like protection as a security guarantee to bring an end to the war. But now it's pertinent to ask, what are they prepared to do to maintain and to ensure that Russia doesn't violate the agreements?
Well, those leaks you are referring to are just speculations. You see, I can't go beyond Russian position, which so far has not been spelled out in details. However, what is clear right now, that it seems that Russia has already made some compromise suggestions, which would probably pave the way for the solution. We understand that any negotiations, it's a deal, and in any deal you are gaining something, you are losing something. There are certain red lines for Russia, like what is non-starter is Ukraine membership in NATO. And as far as security guarantees are concerned, I can hardly imagine that Russia would agree to the deployment of European forces in Ukraine only. Probably will have some mixed, combination of forces with some friendly countries, countries to Russia.
Mr. Strokan, you're right, compromise is required from both the sides, and we know that Putin wants to control the whole of Donbas region in the east, which Zelensky has repeatedly and categorically said that he will not concede. Now, do you think Zelensky would be willing to agree to Trump's proposal of ceding territory and saying no to NATO membership for peace? Or is it seeming too costly a bargain? After all, a bad deal is worse than no deal.
Well, regarding Donbas, there is no way for Russia to compromise, as Donbas has already been written into Russian constitution as one of the new Russian regions. So if President Zelensky disagree with this, then he will have to fight. But then another question comes up. How long will it take us to regain the territory? There's no way to stop the Russian offensive. Probably it's not that fast, but it is going on, and the situation has reached point of non-return. So the only way what Europeans can do, they can prolong the agony of Ukrainian army, which would have to leave Donbass, whether they like it or not. So the question for President Zelensky is either to agree to this now, or to face the defeat probably in 1 or 2 or 3 months. I don't know exactly what would be the time frame, but there's no way for them to control the whole region, since they're actually running out of men, of ammunition. They're on the last legs, and even European support can by no means can come as a dramatic turnaround in the whole situation.
Right, Mrs. Shokin, while you've raised some very important questions there, but another important question is what would it actually take for lasting peace to be established? But of course, we'll have to wait for the talks to see how the situation develops. But for now, thank you so much for joining us in the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And even amid efforts to secure a ceasefire, Russia and Ukraine have continued to engage in fresh strikes and counter-strikes. On Thursday, Ukraine launched a high-risk drone attack deep inside Russia, striking the Engels airbase, while the newly released satellite imagery shows craters and damaged bunkers at the strategic bomber base. The attack had triggered a major blast and fire about 700 kilometers from the front lines of the war. The base in Engels, which dates back to early Soviet times, is home to Vladimir Putin's prized fleet of nuclear-capable bombers. The massive blast shook the entire region, forcing Russian authorities to declare a state of emergency. Engels Air Base is one of Russia's most strategically vital military hubs, and the attack marked one of the boldest moves by Ukraine, proving its ability